The Fallout board game by Fantasy Flight was released in 2017. I picked up a copy shortly after release and did not like it. It was a game I wanted to like, but it was held back by a very clunky victory point system. After a few failed attempts at playing, it ended up stored away in the game closet. In 2018, Fantasy Flight released an expansion to the base game, Fallout New California. This expansion added a single cooperative scenario and expanded the existing scenarios from the base game. New characters, location tiles, events, and item cards rounded out the expansion. I did not pick up a copy of this right away, but instead picked it up on discount. In 2020, Fantasy Flight released their final expansion to the game, Fallout Atomic Bonds. This expansion added in mutations, some elements of Fallout 76, such as camps and workshops, and cooperative variants for every scenario released thus far except for the one added in New California. The agenda-driven victory system was tossed out and replaced by goals. Instead of collecting random agenda cards, players would work together to accomplish a set victory condition from the scenario and a number of random goals equivalent to the number of players. The gameplay is fairly straightforward. Between 1 and 4 players select a character and complete a series of quests while exploring a world made up of random tiles. Each scenario has 2 factions that you can side with, freedom or security. A scenario tracker keeps track of the amount of influence each faction has. When one side reaches the end of the tracker, the game ends. The game also ends if one player accumulates enough influence points via agenda cards. The expansions modify certain aspects of this. Exploration is fairly simple. You flip over tiles, then move across them. If a settlement or ruins named location is present, you can pull from the encounter deck and see what happens. If an enemy icon is present, then a single enemy token is spawned onto that space. Enemies respawn when killed in an active state on a nearby tile. In this way, exploring the map is both good in that more areas open up for questing, but is also bad in that enemy tokens can take over. At the beginning of the game, one main quest card is stationed on the board. This sets the overall story for the scenario, as well as providing the players with an immediate choice as to which faction they want to support. As this quest is completed, more branching quests will be staged on the board. Sometimes a quest also involves adding cards to the encounter decks, which represent the players having to search for things related to the quest. The game starts with 2 encounter decks, one for ruins and the other for settlements. Ruin encounters tend to include enemies and loot, while settlement encounters focus on story and shopping. As you complete quests and encounters, more encounters will be added to the encounter deck. When adding, you take the top X, where X represents for player cards, from the appropriate encounter deck and shuffle in new cards. This results in the added events being drawn sooner rather than having to cycle the entire encounter deck. The combat tests and challenges in the game all revolve around 3 dice. These dice show dots and body hit locations. Each dot represents a success on a test and a hit on you in combat. Sometimes an equipped weapon or test will reference one of the special attributes. When you have the matching attribute, you may re-roll dice once for each matching attribute. In combat, enemy hits always hit you before you can kill them. Enemy hits are also multiplied by their level, so 2 hits from a level 1 enemy becomes 6 damage when the enemy is level 6. There are a few other modifiers dealing with combat, but that is the gist of it. Your character will earn experience and find items as the game progresses. You can also gain rads if you stray into an irradiated zone. Radiation and hit points are tracked on the same line, with radiation limiting your maximum hit points. If the 2 tokens ever meet, you die. When you gain experience, you move the marker from left to right, only stopping on special points you have. Thus, you can level up quickly in the early game and slowly in the late game. When you level up, you draw 2 special tokens at random and pick one. If you already have one or both, you can instead pick a perk card, with some perk cards being obviously better than others. There are also 3 double-sided trait tokens that you can acquire during the game. These tokens are mutually exclusive, and then you can only have one side act. For example, the synth/super mutant token means you can only be one or the other, never both. Likewise, the well-rested/addicted tokens means being addicted prevents you from ever becoming well-rested. It was with all these expansions in hand that we sat down to try and play this game. We played 3 games this past week, once with the base game, once with an expanded scenario from New California, and finally using the enhanced cooperative rules of Atomic Bonds. We used the Welcome to Commonwealth scenario from the base game. I played as the Vault Dweller, my wife used the Wastelander. We made a lot of mistakes in this first game. Let me list them for you. First, We do not multiply damage by enemy level. Second, we do not take damage from enemies before dealing our damage to them. And third, we do not reroll multiple dice on rerolls, only one. This resulted in a very easy game for us. Enemies were not much of a challenge, and my wife breezed through an easy victory with a handful of agenda cards. At the end of the game, she had a full hand of 4 agenda cards while I had just acquired my second. For our next game, we prepared by looking over the rules and reading FAQs. We played the expanded Capital Wasteland scenario. With the expanded character pool, we expected to see the new characters outgun the originals, but that was not the case. Aside from the Super Mutant, probably the least useful character, the characters are fairly well balanced. I used the Enclave Outcast, my wife played as the Ghoul. After the serious drubbing I took in our first game, I played heavy on grabbing agenda cards. Every time a quest showed up that granted agenda cards, I went for it. My wife played casually, exploring and killing enemies. We only made one major mistake. Some events have you draw and fight an enemy. What we did not realize is that these enemies are discarded regardless of how you do in the fight. We soon had a horde of Super Mutants covering the map because I failed to kill them during events. And we did not remove them when the event was over. The corrections from our previous game had a huge impact on this one. We learned that armor is extremely useful and level 3 enemies are not to be trifled with. Expanding rerolls to the Yahtzee format allowed us to complete more tests and challenges than before. My push to collect agenda cards made for a less than fun game. I ended up winning a lopsided victory due to the imbalance in agenda cards between us. Our final game was the one where we incorporated the components from Atomic Bonds. We used the expanded Welcome to the Commonwealth scenario in all of the Atomic Bonds contents. We chose to play on the side of the railroad. I reprised my role as the Vault Dweller, my wife went with the NCR Ranger. Playing in true cooperative fashion made the game more enjoyable, and her ability to open the map had a huge impact on the amount of enemies. We tried to find one of the vaults in a few locations, but were unable to. We deployed a handful of camps, and the fast travel rules associated with them had a large impact on the game. Granted, you can't fast travel when enemies are nearby, but having a camp on the CIT ruins made the completion of the game's final event very easy. However, we didn't end the game by simply completing the final quest. We also needed to complete 2 of the 4 available goals. That took us a lot longer. In fact, we managed to complete our second goal on the same turn that would have resulted in the enemy influence marker reaching the end of the scenario tracker. We only narrowly won the game. All in all, we did find the game enjoyable when played in a cooperative fashion. I'm not sure if I like all the extra stuff added with Atomic Bonds, but the system does have a built-in timer to keep games from lasting too long. The mutation cards add a nice thematic touch to the radiation system beyond simply limiting your hit points. The camp upgrades didn't have a big impact on our game, but the fast travel did. One problem that is extremely hard to fix is that of the randomness of the items deck. You can go an entire game and never draw a weapon or armor card. Sometimes you do draw one, but it's so expensive that you can't collect enough caps to buy it. Because of difficulty in taking down tough enemies, you will need some rerolls or armor to survive. The base game on its own is still crap. The competitive agenda card based victory system is far too random, and when players are supporting opposing factions, no one can achieve a victory. In the 2 games we used the agenda rules, we only had around 6 or 7 agenda cards pooled between 2 players when the game ended. I cannot imagine what would happen with 4 players fighting over the agenda quest. If you're going to buy this game, it would be in your best interest to buy the base game in both expansions. If you can't buy it all at once, I would suggest buying Atomic Bonds before New California. That is our review of Fallout, the board game. As always, if you have any comments, please put them below in the comment section, and like and subscribe as it feeds the algorithm. I'll see you again next time, and have an enjoyable day.